The Marvelous Misadventures of Captain and Matteo. Fishy Business by Erebus Esprit. Thud, thud, thud. The old Canid approached the door, armed with knife and cutting board. His eyes flicked to the cook stove, where a large, brassy egg lay draped in damp towels. Had they come for him, at last? Had they come for it? Thud, thud, thud. The pounding continued. 3 raps against the door, sharp and confident. The Canid's chest heaved, though with fear or anticipation, he couldn't rightly say. Alone and unbothered, that was the deal. No one should have found him. No one. Thud, thud, thud. The hinges rattled. The wood shook. The sound echoed. The door was solid and thick, but a house made of wood is easily burned. The Canid had to keep them away from the egg. Best to take them by surprise. He reached for the latch, heart pounding, breath rattling in his throat. He could probably stick 1 or 2 before they got their wits around them. If there were more, well, he would deal with that. Thud, thud, thud. The Canid flipped the latch and sprang out with a snarl. He collided with the man standing on the other side, and they both went down in a heap. The knife flashed, the fangs gleamed, and the man's startled cry rent the night. "Wait, Capitan, it's me!" The Canid froze, eyes wild as he scanned the surroundings. The man had come alone. His scent was familiar, heavily perfumed after the Lenothian fashion. "Matteo? I knew I'd find you here. Well, I searched 6 other abandoned wilderness halls, but I knew you'd be at one of them. We made a pact. We agreed to stay away until it's safe for them. That's what I'm here about. Let me up, would you?" The Canid let out a heavy breath, and Captain stood. He tucked the knife into his belt and offered a furry hand to the man. Matteo took it and dusted himself off, taking especially good care of the massive, foppish, feathered hat that he had somehow managed to make look dashing. "You're a hard hound to find, Capitan." Captain grunted and turned for the door. "Suppose you'll be wanting a drink." "You know me so well." The door shut behind them, and Captain placed the cutting board on the counter, opting instead for a stoppered jug. With a deft pull, he uncorked it and poured 2 mugs of clear liquid. Matteo looked down his nose at the offered drink. "Water. Really? A Canid of your tastes. I expected more, Capitan. You call this hospitality?" Captain set the glass down in front of him and placed himself in front of the cook stove. Matteo picked up the wooden mug, tilted it back, then spluttered half back up again. "Holy goats, Capitan! What the hell is that?" "Shine." "Shine?" "Aye, shine. Specially distilled. Made it myself." "A poison?" Captain tilted his own drink back and turned it over, keeping eye contact as nary a drop spilled. "Not exactly." "Well, I suppose a man must have his hobbies, even a Canid." "Why are you here, Matteo?" Matteo's playful expression went deadly serious. "The guy's dead. Tara's missing." Wooden splinters fell to the floor with a crunch as Captain uncurled his fist from the remnants of the shattered mug. "When?" "Last moon." "The others?" "Rinpool is spending some time off plane, last I heard. Something about a sanctuary close in his pact. Guys with her people, well beyond my ability to contact. That leaves you and me, Capitan." Captain nodded. His hands strayed to the counter next to his dagger handle. "Where's your egg, Matteo?" The man patted a satchel at his side. "Quite safe. Nice part about being an egg is that it doesn't need air." "Spatial satchel. Those aren't cheap." "Neither am I. Anonymity might please you all, but I have standards. The best kept secret is the one staring you in the face." "How do you know something happened to the others?" Captain tried to keep his voice casual, but his hands stayed near the blade. Matteo had a long rapier strapped to his hip, and was by far the better swordsman. If things came to blows, the blood would be tidal. Mateo's face grew strained.
Our mutual friend told me.
Captain felt his fur stand on end, and an involuntary shiver ran up his spine.
You saw them. More accurate to say he saw me. He told me about the Ka and Terra. Told me to find you, and told me where we needed to go. There are few enough dragons in the world. Surely some other heroes can do the dirty work. Not this time, friend. Not when it's one of our own. Still, not all is lost. I brought you a spare satchel, and I have a summoning stone.
Captain tilted his head.
But do you have a way to get back?
Mateo's confident expression slipped.
Shit. No, I forgot something. It'll be fine, I'm sure. Some time back with civilization won't be terrible, you know. For you, civilization has never pretended to include me. It will when you're with me, friend. Now, strap on your sword and let's be off.
Captain didn't move.
What's the matter with you? I can't endanger her egg.
Mateo looked stricken.
Capitan, it's Terra. She's one of us. If they killed Taka, they know what they're up against. They'll be ready for us. Then 2 more eggs gone. We're all that's left, Mateo. We have a responsibility larger than any one person.
Mateo was on his feet.
We have a responsibility to each other. I would have thought you, of all people, would recognize that.
Captain tensed, but Mateo made no move toward him. Instead, he turned to the door and stalked out.
I guess we now know what your loyalty is worth.
The wood counter ground against Captain's finger claws. He felt the weight pressing down against his shoulders, shoving his feet into the floorboards. It had been a year, perhaps more, since he'd last felt it. Ever since they had made their agreement and gone their separate ways. The terrible weight of responsibility, of command. Taka was dead. Terra was missing. How many more before them? How many more had he failed, abandoned, forgotten? 4 canids flashed across his mind's eye, as real as if they were standing in front of him. Could he really withstand more failure?
Wait, Mateo, wait!
Captain tore through the doorway. Mateo stopped to look at him, a mask of anger and hurt, one hand clutched around a summoning stone.
You're right. Give me the satchel. I'm going with you.
Mateo's shoulders sagged, and he threw a satchel.
Good. I'd hoped you come to your senses. Being alone here didn't do you any favors.
Captain chuffed, but said nothing. Mateo crushed the stone in his palm, and a thin blue light surrounded them. The forest faded away, and a queasy feeling gripped Captain's stomach. A growl escaped his throat, and he tightened his grip on the egg. Light surrounded them, giving way to a high ocean cliffside. Wind buffeted them, driving them toward the edge and down 100 feet to the rocky waters below. Captain stumbled as he backed away from the cliff, clutching tight at the egg. With as much care as he could manage, he stuffed it inside the satchel, watching as it settled inside the interdimensional space. Then he tightened the strap around himself.
No sword?
Captain glanced up at Mateo.
Got rid of it.
Mateo frowned.
Big fella like you, you're going to need something more than a little knife. Here.
Mateo pulled a second rapier from his belt and held it out, hilt first. It was a beautiful piece of steel, heavily ornamented and light as a feather. Captain took it with more than a little hesitation. Holding a sword again, even one as light as this, conjured a host of bloody memories. He stuffed it into his belt before the shaking of his hands could betray him. Mateo had already turned his attention back to their surroundings.
Looks like a village down there. Do you see it?
A small collection of huts near the water's edge. A few fishing boats were beached and empty, away from the crashing waves. The sun was low in the eastern sky. Wherever they were, it was far to the west from Captain's little cabin. The thought made him shudder. How close were they to Turin? Were they even now within the borders? What welcome would await him?
Come on. A warm bed and a strong drink will do you some good. Looks like a storm's blowing in.
Dark clouds roiled to the south, barreling closer with each moment. Captain and Matteo picked their way down the slope, clinging to the rock face as the wind whipped and tugged at them. Captain's feet sunk into the damp sand as he stood on the shoreline. Next to him, Matteo gasped and shook out his arms. The chill cut through Captain's fur, making him shiver. Ahead of them, the village looked even more desolate than on the cliff. A dozen huts stuck out of the sand, each in a different state of dilapidation. Thatch roofs were patchy and neglected, some with holes large enough to crawl through. The boats were eroded, with visible gaps between the planks, seaworthy as a stone.
What a cheery sight this is, huh? Think they took all the drinks with them?
Captain eyed the huts with suspicion. They looked abandoned, but that didn't stop his hackles from rising. Eyes were on him, he was sure of it, but he couldn't find their source. Above, the sky darkened. An ominous rumble of thunder pealed, and sheets of rain approached in a mighty storm wall. Captain grabbed Matteo's collar and shoved him toward a hut with a mostly intact roof. They had the door open and shut scant moments before the deluge hit, masking every noise beneath the onslaught of tempestuous fury. The roof dripped, one corner completely exposed to the elements, which spread a puddle across the floor. What little furniture existed was in disarray, broken beyond repair, and left to rot along with the rest of the village. The floorboards squeaked beneath their feet as they huddled inside. Captain's hand found the hilt of the rapier Matteo had given him, looking for threats, but none appeared. Matteo sat in the driest section he could find and retrieved a lute from his satchel.
I suppose we might as well make the best of a bad time, don't you think?
Captain gave the man a long-suffering look and said nothing. Matteo's fingers tweaked the tuning pegs, gave an experimental strum, then played 3 complex chords. The air shimmered around them, growing warm and dry. He strummed a few more, and the ache of the climb down the cliffs faded into a distant memory. Captain sat with his back against the wall, keeping the door and the collapsed roof corner in his sight as he held the satchel, and the egg inside in his lap. When Matteo finished his song, the hut seemed almost homely, despite the storm raging outside.
I remember you used to sing when I played, Capitan, or at least accompany me with the flute. Whatever happened to those days?
Captain didn't answer. Songs and music were things of the past. Ballads of great deeds and past glories were all the more bitter when each bloody victory had laid the stage for a dozen defeats. He shouldn't have come. It was arrogance to think he could help Terra. He was an old war dog. He had one responsibility left: protect the egg, and he risked that by being here. Too late to turn back now.
I've missed our conversations, you know. I talk, you glare, I talk. Reminds me of the good old days, right before you told us good luck and fucked off into the ass end of the world.
Captain's eyes flicked to Matteo, who stared back with an easy smile on his face. He felt a small prick of danger, old friend that it was. He took in Matteo, sitting cross-legged with the lute still in his hands, playing steady chords. If he was using magic, it was more subtle than Captain could detect.
Do you remember those days, Capitan?
I remember.
Matteo played a dissonant chord.
He speaks, and here I thought you might never again grace me with your words. Seems I'm rarely worth even that in your estimation these days.
Captain flinched.
Matteo, save it. Waste all your words now and I'll have nothing left. Let's find Terra. Then you can go back to brooding at the edge of the world.
Captain dropped his eyes back to the satchel in his lap. He couldn't blame Matteo for feeling abandoned. How many others had Captain left behind? Everyone, it seemed. Life was a lot more complicated without orders to follow. It was hard to know the right thing to do. It had been hard to learn. Harder still with the weight of responsibility always on his shoulders. Splitting up had been the best way to keep the eggs safe, hadn't it? Taka dead. Tara missing. It was hard to say anymore.
I'm sorry, Matteo.
Captain looked up and froze. Matteo was gone. There had been no noise, no movement. The spell of warmth and dryness faded, giving way to a chill wind. Captain scrambled to his feet, clutching the satchel in one hand, Matteo's rapier in the other. He swung about, searching the dark corners, but there was nothing. His eyes roamed over the broken furniture, the busted roof, the closed door, but there were no secrets revealed. The leather grip squeaked in his hand. Stay and hide, or go out into the storm? Was Matteo playing a prank on him? Gone invisible, perhaps, or conjured an illusion? Unlikely. Matteo was many things. A brilliant duelist, a famous bard, a loyal, if temperamental, friend. But prankster he was not. That role was served by Renpul, and Renpul was off-plane. Stay or go, hide or seek. Captain glanced at the satchel, still clutched to his side, and slipped it over his shoulder. It was a risk to the egg, but Matteo had an egg as well. More than that, Matteo was his friend, and Captain had lost enough friends. The door gave way beneath his shoulder, and Captain burst out into the storm. Water soaked him, dripped into his eyes, clung to his fur, made him slow and heavy. Shadows danced as lightning flashed overhead, followed by the furious roars of thunder. Breath came fast and heavy in Captain's throat, his hand a vice around the rapier's grip. Something flitted past Captain's shoulder, and he spun, sword drawn back to swing. But nothing was there. Just shadow and storm and the broken husks of an abandoned fishing village. Captain spun again, movement flashing in the corners of his vision, but all he found was rain. He blinked, rubbed his face, squeezed water out of the fur around his eyes, and looked again. The shadow of a man stood in front of him, noticeable only by the rain splatter across his surface. Captain tensed. His heart hammered in his chest, and his left hand went down to clutch the satchel protectively. But the shadow didn't move. It stood not 3 feet away, unflinching, unyielding. Captain stared back, willing himself not to blink. He made no move to strike. What would steel do against shadow? The fur on his back stiffened, and he felt the chill run through him. The shadow stepped forward, then again. Then it was past him. Captain turned, watched it go as it walked toward the shore. It was moving away. 5 feet. 10. Then Captain was following it. He shoved the sword into his belt, little use that it was to him. The shadow stopped in front of the broken, upturned fishing boats, then turned around. Captain froze, 1 foot still in the air. The shadow broke apart into nothing, leaving him alone again. A muffled sob broke the air, almost drowned by the storm. Captain moved to the boat and dug his fingers beneath the lip. With a heave, he threw the whole thing aside and found Matteo curled beneath, hands covering his face, whole body racked with wet gasps and sobs. Captain grabbed his shoulders and hauled him upright, but the man was inconsolable.
No, God's Aurelia, no!
Captain looked, but there was no sign of the shadow. They were alone in the storm. With nothing left to do, he held Matteo up by the collar with one hand, then backhanded the bard with the other. Matteo staggered, eyes wide and wild.
No!
Captain stumbled back as Matteo drew his steel, narrowly avoiding the sharpened edge as it jabbed toward his face. Captain took another step back, eyes wide, as Matteo swung at him again. The man was wild, muttering and babbling in equal measure. His eyes looked straight through Captain, barely acknowledging him. A third swing, and Captain caught it on his own sword, hastily pulled from his belt. The impact seemed to jar some sense into the man, who looked at Captain again, a strange, feral stare.
Matteo? Kill her, would you? I think not.
Matteo's blade snaked forward like a flash of lightning. Captain caught it on his own like a shriek of thunder and spun away, but Matteo pursued. The clashing of steel rang out amid the storm. It was all Captain could do to stay on the defensive. If it came to strength, he would win easily, but Matteo's rapiers were thin, light blades, intended for speed, and the bard knew how to use them well. They moved away from the boats and back along the thoroughfare of the village, Captain always on the back step. Why Matteo had chosen this moment to snap into insanity, Captain didn't know, but this was no ordinary rage. Eyes glazed and wild, hands shaking despite their speed, a manic babble spewing. It was clear something had infected his mind. The only question left was why Captain remained unaffected. A difference of physiology, perhaps, or psychology. Matteo's movements slowed as they neared the opposite edge of the village. Captain kept up his defense, waiting for an opportunity. It came in the form of a lunge, too committed. Matteo's foot slipped on the wet sand and his stance lengthened dramatically. Captain scooped a handful of wet sand and flung it, striking the bard squarely in the face. He cried out, dropping the sword to paw at his eyes, and fell backwards to the ground. Captain descended a moment later, a single thump to Matteo's forehead, similarly echoed as the head hit the sand, and the fight was done. Captain let out a slow, heavy breath, then turned to the shadow watching from the nearby stoop, visible only by the silhouette of disrupted rainfall. The shadow pantomimed a clap, silent and staring, then pointed down the shore. Captain followed the gesture and saw a narrow path leading from the edge of the village to a structure set into the cliffside. Pillars, a statue, a door. Captain turned his eyes back to the shadow, but it was gone.
Capitan?
Matteo had dug the sand out of his eyes. He looked up at Captain with dark confusion.
My head hurts.
Captain grabbed Matteo by the front of his shirt and hauled him to his feet.
Glad you're not trying to take mine off. What in the hells was that?
Matteo shuddered.
A shade. Nasty bastards. They take your happiest thoughts and turn them against you. How did you resist it?
Captain stared at the bard for a long moment, then pointed toward the structure built into the side of the cliff.
I reckon what we're looking for is in there.
Matteo followed the pointed finger and shuddered.
Always a creepy temple. Just once I'd like a quest to lead us to a bathhouse. I could dunk you in holy water, see what happens. I resent the implication.
Captain checked his satchel to make sure the egg inside was still safe and secure, then set off toward the structure, Matteo falling in beside him.
Thanks, by the way. Not sure what would have happened if you hadn't been there to snap me out of it. Sorry I tried to take your head off. Nothing I didn't deserve. Who is Aurelia? Someone I knew once. Someone I cared for. Alas, circumstance has separated us. I didn't take you for a settling down type. She must have been something special. That she is. I'd very much like to tell her that someday. What's stopping you? Right now? That ugly statue.
Matteo nodded toward a huge, fish-like statue that stood over the door. Captain bared his teeth at it.
Deep dweller? I don't think so. The iconography looks different to me. I think this is something Sahuagin-based. Are you knocking or am I?
Matteo put a hand against the big stone door and pushed. Nothing happened. He frowned, examining it more closely.
Locked? Not locked. Just damned heady. Stand aside.
Captain's foot slammed into the door, kicking it wide open with the rasp of grinding stone. They entered, swords drawn and ready. The temple was huge, cutting not only into the cliff, but the ground below. Matteo gave a low whistle, and a blue light filtered into existence near his head. With a soft melody, it zipped out, shining over the area. 20 feet ahead of them, the ground disappeared into black water. At the far end, 100 yards distant, a half-submerged archway hinted at a distant antechamber.
Looks like you get your bathhouse after all. Oh, joyous day. Got anything in your bag of tricks for this?
Matteo took out a tuning fork and tapped it against the ground, letting out a low hum. He held the fork just above the surface of the water, then tapped it against Captain, then himself. The sound disappeared, but the hum remained.
Puppies first.
Captain looked down at the black water with more than a little suspicion, then shrugged. He couldn't get any wetter. The first step onto the water's surface held his weight, as did the 5th, then the 10th. He expected to plunge into the depths with each step, but the magic held. Matteo made his way out onto the water as well. The far passage loomed as they approached. The air gained a sinister weight. Captain's lips curled.
Stinks. Ugh, don't be a baby.
Matteo pushed forward and ducked under the arch. Captain followed a moment later. The light fluttered forward, then stopped near the center of the room, highlighting a raised platform that extended up out of the water. A dozen corpses were strewn about it. Each had a face wreathed in darkness despite the light. A woman knelt in the center, face raised to the ceiling, mouth drawn open in a soundless scream. Her stomach had been ripped open, entrails laying on the ground before her. The woman's head jerked sharply down at them, her mouth still open.
Is that?
Matteo retched, and the plopping of sick hitting water echoed. Captain stared back, taking in the woman's dark skin, the scars around her wrists, the unnatural glow of her eyes.
Oh, Tara. What did they do to you?
Captain took a step forward. The water below them rippled. Then the surface broke as grasping hands clutched at him. A dozen drowned corpses clawed upward, dripping filthy black water. Captain jabbed the tip of the rapier into the yawning face of the drowned corpse, and it fell beneath the water with a splash. A hand slipped around his ankle and yanked his leg into the water. An icy cold spread up his knee, tingling the flesh until it was numb and unresponsive.
Capitaine!
The corpses surged toward him, hands grasping, fingers clutching, seeking to drive him down, down, down into the depths. He swung the blade into another corpse, cutting deep into its skull before 3 sets of arms grabbed his own and held him fast. They pulled at him and, slowly, he sank below the waterline. Numbing death crawled through his body, infecting and deadening every nerve. The only reason he wasn't already dead was Matteo's spell, but it was only a matter of time. Sooner, not later. Something whizzed past Captain's head and an arm fell into the water, detached from its host. Music filled the air, a complex, discordant melody that echoed against the water and the walls, compounding on itself to become its own accompaniment. Matteo swept in, lute in hand, with all the grace of a trained court dancer. Above him, a rapier flew in graceful circles, every swing taking its pound of flesh from the corpses around Captain. 2 disembodied hands of blue light appeared in the air before him, grabbing Captain around the arm and hauling him to his feet. Moving was difficult as Captain hobbled toward the center platform. Behind him, Matteo finished carving the last of the drowned. The hands disappeared as Captain collapsed against the stone dais, sprawling in front of Tara's mutilated form. Matteo stepped past him a moment later, blade cleaned and resheathed on his belt. Tara's head swiveled back and forth between them, eyes wild, mouth unnaturally wide. Her jaw was dislocated, probably broken, but she made no noise. Her guts decorated the ground between them, arranged in a strange pattern. Captain grabbed Mateo's leg and held him back.
Don't fucking do that.
Ritual magic.
Mateo peered down at the pattern of entrails, then nodded.
Stasis magic. That'll be the only thing keeping her alive. Tara, do you recognize us? Do you know who we are?
Tara blinked, but made no sound.
Well, that's something at least. We can work with this. Blink twice for yes, 3 times for no. Understand?
Blink, blink.
The thing that did this to you, is it still here?
Blink, blink.
Do you know why it did this to you?
Blink, blink.
Your egg, is it safe?
Blink, blink, blink.
Is it gone?
Blink, blink, blink.
If we disrupt the ritual, will you die?
Blink.
What the fuck does that mean?
It means she doesn't know.
Oh, right. Well, what do you think?
Captain dragged himself around the ritual until he was behind Tara.
Break the magic that binds the ritual. I'll do what I can for her.
Fucking hells, Capitan, are you sure?
We can't leave her like this. We'll have to try and get her out of this mess.
Mateo screwed up his face and bit his lip. Then he held up his lute.
2 blinks, fine. You're both married and Rempel.
Captain placed one hand on the back of Tara's shaved head and the other on her back, between her shoulder blades. Her heart did not beat. Her lungs did not breathe. The stasis spell would not allow such things. Once it was over, then the real battle for Tara's life would begin. Captain closed his eyes and tried to open his senses to her. Tara had always been the most conflicted of them, but they shared a common purpose, a common bond. Captain pressed against that bond, and the words to an oath, long forgotten, sprang unbidden to his lips.
Shepherd the lost.
A gentle glow appeared beneath his hand, the energy seeping into Tara's skin. Slowly, her disemboweled organs lifted, finding place once more inside her. The stasis spell fractured, then shattered completely. Tara let out a wailing moan, hands trying to clutch at her insides, but held back by the chains on her wrists.
Hang on, Tara. We'll have you out of there in a moment.
Mateo slipped a set of lockpicks out of his sleeve and got to work on the manacles. Captain focused his efforts on channeling the healing energy into Tara's wound. The guts were off the ground now, and the incision began to close. Tara shuddered and writhed, then lifted her eyes to meet Captain's. A loud pop echoed as her jaw moved into place.
Trap! It's a trap! Get out!
The water rippled. Small waves spread outward from the platform, lapping against the walls and rebounding back toward the dais, spilling across the surface of the rock. Mateo popped one manacle and set to work on the other.
Of course it's a trap, Tara. We're here to spring you from it.
With one hand free, Tara clutched at her stomach and groaned. A light appeared from her hand, the same color as Captain's, and the wounds healed faster.
What happened to you?
Not now. Get ready.
Eyes poked out of the water, huge and ichthytic. They were followed by scaled, hunchbacked forms. Water dripped on the stone as they stepped onto the platform, webbed feet smacking loudly against the rock. 12, all told. Faces so alien that emotion was impossible to read. One of them croaked something, which the rest echoed, but the meaning of their words was unknowable. Each of them wielded a trident and held it menacingly. Mateo cut his eyes toward Captain as the second manacle fell with a clatter.
Told you it was Sahuagin.
Captain growled in response and brandished the rapier threateningly at the fish folk. Tara grabbed his arm before he could strike any of them.
Captain, wait.
One of the Sahuagin raised a hand and knelt, dropping the tip of the trident. Slowly, one by one, the rest did the same.
What is this?
Captain glanced between Tara and the Sahuagin.
They made the stasis ritual, didn't they? They saved you. Why?
Tara clutched her stomach and grimaced, then stood to her feet.
Cultists. Followers of Lady Chroma. They ambushed me. Brought me here.
Mateo sneered his disgust.
For what end?
Captain eyed the room, the dais, the water.
They tried to corrupt the egg.
Tara nodded.
Incubate the egg inside the bonded protector. Then butcher them as ritual sacrifice to Lady Chroma. It would have worked had not the Sahuagin protected me.
Mateo's eyes dropped to Tara's stomach.
Then the egg. Your egg is still inside, yes. Gods. What do we do now?
Tara straightened herself and spoke in the croaking language of the fish folk. They croaked back, nodding huge heads, then backed into the water.
They too wish to see dragons returned, but not under the leash of Lady Chroma. They won't harm us. These cultists, are they the same ones who killed Takar? Takar's dead? Allegedly. I have it on good authority. What about Rimple and Kai? Safe for the moment. It seemed you were second on their list. I'm surprised they didn't go for Capitan first. Head of the snake and all that.
Tara gave Mateo a flat look.
Anti-divination warding. None of us could have found him unless he wanted us to.
Mateo raised an eyebrow at Captain.
Where did you learn anti-divination warding? I didn't.
Mateo opened his mouth to argue, then raised his eyebrows in understanding.
Right. Our mutual friend. So, what happens now?
The air rippled, sending a shiver down Captain's spine. His fur stood on end of its own accord. Next to him, Tara and Mateo shuddered, each having similar reactions. Mateo wrapped his arms about himself, his breath shaky.
He's here.
The judge appeared, standing on the water near the submerged archway. He looked the same as when Captain had first met him, many years before. A fine courtier's outfit, a featureless mask with two gaping black holes for eyes, disproportionately long limbs. They held a golden fruit of a kind Captain didn't recognize in one hand, lazily slicing strips of it with their thumb. Once cut, the judge tilted their head back and dropped the slice into their eye holes. Mateo gagged.
You have done well, all of you. I'm glad to see you both alive, Tara Strong.
Tara gritted her teeth, clutching at her stomach. Captain met the judge's hollow gaze.
What happens to us now?
What do you want, Captain?
What did he want? To spend the rest of his life in the cabin, safe and alone where he could raise the egg in privacy. To liberate the rest of his warband from the Turan military. To fix his mistakes. To right his wrongs. To bring back those he had lost. All of it and more. Captain was nothing but wants. Nothing but regrets. But what was done, and there would be no changing it. The judge nodded.
I understand.
Can you remove the egg?
I can.
Will you?
That depends on you, Tara Strong.
Mateo cut in before Tara could respond.
What do you want from us? You never come to say hi. It's always something or other. What is it now?
You are always free to deny me, Mateo Amore. You have never been under threat to refuse.
Doesn't feel that way.
I point the path. I conduct equal trade. Bestow my blessings for just compensation.
And what a path it is.
Quiet, Mateo.
Same old Capitan.
You are here for a purpose. What do you need of us?
The eggs will hatch soon. All of you will need to gather to one spot. The clutch must be born together under the full moon.
What about Taka's egg? He's dead, is he not? The egg corrupted.
Taka Kalir is not dead.
Mateo spluttered in outrage.
You told me he was dead. You said Tara was captured.
Taka Kalir is lost, Mateo Amore. He is not dead. You three must find him. Rinpelstinska and Kai Kitsu are already searching, but time is running out. The clutch must be born together.
And if it isn't?
Then they will die, all of them, and dragons will walk the world no more. There will be a great imbalance in nature, and the effects will devastate everything, every plane.
Always the end of the fucking world.
Captain said nothing. The choice lay with him, as it always had. The judge's gaze pierced his soul, bore into him until no secret was left unscoured. Captain let out a sigh.
Send us where we are needed.
The judge cocked their head. Then with a flick of thumbs, the golden fruit fell into a jumble of slices, which they then scooped into their eye holes. A snap of fingers, and the room was empty.